Amara was declared the winner of the National Merit Scholarship, but 3 days later, her name was removed from the list. What nobody knew was that her silence about what really happened was protecting a truth that could shake the entire education system. Let me tell you about Amara, the brilliant student from Bright Future Academy. That Tuesday morning at Bright Future Academy began like any other day. The sun rose over the school compound, casting long shadows across the dusty courtyard. Students arrived in groups, their voices filling the air with laughter and gossip. Teachers gathered near the staff room, sipping tea and discussing the day's lessons. Everything seemed ordinary, peaceful even. Nothing suggested that before the day ended, one student's dreams would be shattered in front of the entire school. Amara sat at her desk in the senior class, her textbooks arranged neatly in front of her. She had arrived early, as always, using the quiet morning hours to review her notes. Amara was known throughout Bright Future Academy as the most dedicated student. She never missed a class, never submitted assignments late, and never caused trouble. Her teachers called her a role model. Her classmates both admired and envied her brilliant mind. For 3 years, Amara had worked toward one goal, winning the National Merit Scholarship. It was the only way she could afford university. Her father was a security guard who worked night shifts, and her mother sold vegetables at the market. They had sacrificed everything to keep her in school. Every morning, Amara saw the exhaustion in their eyes and promised herself she would make them proud. The scholarship results were supposed to be announced that afternoon. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she tried to focus on the mathematics problem in front of her. Her best friend, Kioma, kept glancing at her with an encouraging smile. The whole class knew how much this meant to Amara. Some students had already given up, knowing they could never compete with her scores. Others had wealthy parents and did not need scholarships, but for Amara, this was everything. At exactly 2 o'clock, the principal's voice crackled through the loudspeakers. All students were summoned to the assembly ground immediately. Amara's heart began to race. This was it. She stood up slowly, smoothing down her uniform. Kioma squeezed her hand as they walked together toward the assembly ground. The entire school gathered under the hot afternoon sun. Teachers stood in a line near the podium, their faces unreadable. The principal held a white envelope in his hands, the official seal of the National Education Board visible even from a distance. He spoke about hard work, dedication, and the pride of the school. Then, finally, he opened the envelope. Amara's name echoed across the assembly ground. The National Merit Scholarship goes to Miss Amara Okafor of Senior Class 5. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then the ground erupted in applause. Students cheered, teachers smiled, and Kioma hugged Amara so tightly she could barely breathe. Amara felt tears streaming down her face. All the sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, all the prayers had finally been answered. She walked to the podium on shaking legs. The principal handed her a certificate and shook her hand firmly. Cameras flashed. Her name would be in the school newsletter, on the notice board, maybe even in the local newspaper. As she stood there, holding the certificate that represented her future, Amara noticed something strange. Mr. Okonkwo, the head of the examination committee, was not smiling. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his arms folded, his expression dark and troubled. The celebration continued after assembly. Students surrounded Amara, congratulating her and asking for study tips. Teachers praised her in the staff room. The principal even called her parents to share the good news. That evening, Amara walked home floating on air. She could already imagine herself at university, studying medicine, becoming a doctor, and changing her family's fortune forever. But 3 days later, everything changed. Amara arrived at school on Friday morning and immediately sensed something was wrong. Groups of students stood in clusters, whispering and glancing in her direction. Kioma ran to her, her face pale with worry. "Have you seen the notice board?" she asked breathlessly. Amara's stomach dropped. Together they walked to the main notice board near the principal's office. There, posted in bold letters, was a new announcement. The National Merit Scholarship had been awarded to someone else, a student named Grace Adebayo. Amara's name was nowhere on the list. She read the notice 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. This could not be real. There had to be a mistake. She had won. The principal had announced it. She had held the certificate in her own hands. "There must be an error," Kiyoma said, her voice shaking with anger. "We need to report this immediately." Before Amara could respond, a voice called her name. It was the school secretary, asking her to come to the principal's office right away. Amara's legs felt weak as she walked down the corridor. Every step felt heavier than the last. She knew, somehow, that this was not a simple mistake. Something bigger was happening, something she did not yet understand. The principal's office was crowded. Mr. Okonkwo sat in the corner, his expression still dark. 2 other teachers stood near the window. The principal sat behind his desk, his fingers pressed together in front of him. He did not ask Amara to sit. She stood there, small and confused, waiting for an explanation. The principal spoke slowly. He said there had been a review of the scholarship results. He said that errors had been discovered in the scoring process. He said that upon careful examination, Grace Adebayo had actually scored higher than Amara. The scholarship would go to Grace instead. He said this was final and there would be no further discussion. Amara's field felt the room spinning. "But sir," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I checked my scores myself. I had the highest marks in every subject. How is this possible?" Mr. Okonkwo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The other teachers looked away. The principal's expression hardened. "Are you questioning the decision of this committee? Are you suggesting that we have made a mistake?" "No, sir, The matter is closed, Amara. You should be grateful for the education you have received here. Not every student can win scholarships. You must accept this with grace and move on." But Amara could not move on. As she left the office, her mind raced with questions. She remembered Mr. Okonkwo's expression during the assembly. She remembered how quickly the decision had been reversed. And most importantly, she remembered something she had overheard 3 weeks ago. It had been late afternoon, and Amara had stayed back to complete a science project in the laboratory. As she passed by the staff room, she heard voices raised in argument. She hadn't meant to overhear, but the voices were loud and angry. One of them belonged to Mr. Okonkwo. "She is the daughter of nobody," Mr. Okonkwo had said. "Why should she get the scholarship when there are students from important families who deserve it more?" Another voice, quieter but firm, had responded, "Because she earned it fairly. The results are clear." "Results can be adjusted," Mr. Okonkwo replied. "We have done it before." Amara froze in the corridor, her heart pounding. She hadn't understood the full meaning of the conversation then, but now, standing in the empty hallway outside the principal's office, everything became clear. The scholarship had not been given to Grace because Grace scored higher. It had been given to Grace because Grace's father was a wealthy businessman who had donated generously to the school. The scholarship had been stolen from her.